Yo, yo. Good morning, everybody. Well, I mean, if you're in a different time zone, good day or good evening. Just woke up a few moments ago, have some breakfast, and uh, I've been meaning to live stream this week, but things got really busy. And the thing that I'd like to cover is a YouTuber named Sophie recently released a video on death, consent, and animals in relation to, well, he's an antinatalist, and I wanted to like go over this. I did not go over the full video because there were some aspects of it that I didn't understand at the beginning, and that was to do with the his framing of the axiological asymmetry argument from David Benatar. Um, I didn't understand how he worded it, and we talked on Discord. So thank you for that, Sophie. I have a little bit of a better understanding of where you're coming from. And in that conversation, he was saying how he doesn't understand how someone else would have a different perspective on how he understands it. And to me, it's just the rhetorical wording that confused me, and we'll get into that in a moment. I just want to make sure I'm actually live streaming. One sec. Well, I'm live streaming, but I don't know if my sound's coming in. Okay. Looks like we're good to go. So please excuse me. I don't like eating or drinking when I'm on live stream, but I had a late day and or late start to my day, and let's just get right into it. Oh, let's see. Hello, Tom. Why are you live streaming today? Because yesterday I had a little bit of a. I wanted to live stream throughout this week, but I just never got around. Like, I live alone, and I don't understand. I'd say Monday to Friday, I'm insanely busy, and I don't get it. I'm gonna have to break up. I'm gonna have to do like a time schedule about my every day and figure out where I'm spending time. Like, uh, I get that I spend a lot of time on Discord, but that's usually after work, and I'm dead tired and don't want to do much. But yeah, I haven't had time to live stream at all, and that was my intention this week. So that's kind of the reason I wanted to do it this morning, is because if I say to myself, I'll do it after breakfast, I'll do it after my walk, I'll do it after blah 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 blah. It just never happens. I just end up finding something else to do, and I never end up live streaming. So, but Sophie released this. When did he release this? 2 days ago, and yeah, I haven't even watched the full thing. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a long one. It's 37 minutes. So let's go for it.
So, as you can see, today I will be talking about consent violation and deprivation. It's something that came about after thinking a little bit about veganism and then reading about philosophy of death a little bit, more specifically position of David Benatar. And yeah, and I always had this, these two different arguments.
The other reason I have an interest in this particular video is because some people may be aware, Matti Hyri is also covering the topic of death related to animals, particularly when it comes to killing extinction. He's arguing, well, he made a video arguing under better never to have been, you can have a reasonable inference given Benatar's thesis to derive a type of killing extinction in a specific case of animals going before we go. And through the commentary, the last I heard is that they reviewed the book and they realized that isn't the case. And they're going to come out with another video. That was about 10 days ago. So I don't know when the next video will come out. I am looking forward to it, and there's no rush. Like, what are we rushing for, right? But I'm looking forward to it. I'm curious how Matty Hyrie is going to resolve this, or how he's going to approach this. So it's just interesting timing. Matty Hyrie is tackling the philosophy of death in animals, and Sophie Feely is doing the same, but for veganism, not killing extinction. Just interesting timing. I don't think, yeah. But philosophy of death is a particular interest of mine as well. So
Arguments for antinatalism, the consent arguments and the asymmetry argument. And I always thought of them of two different arguments for the same position. But today I will look into exactly what kind of difference exists between them. And I believe that there is a very important fundamental distinction between these two arguments, and the way that we can use them, and the consequences that will follow from that distinction that we will make. So it will be a little bit theoretical, but in the end, it will be some interesting conclusions that we can make through this. So let me just give an overview of these two arguments. So the point is not really the argument themselves, but what lies behind them. And I believe that when we really understand these two arguments, it can show us that there is a kind of ontological distinction between what the asymmetry argument is working with and what the consent argument is working with, and what follows from it. All right, so
just a heads up, I'm not well versed in the consent argument. I have to always review someone else's paper on it to get a good overview, and I did not do that. So kind of going in with that a little bit blind. But I'm familiar with the asymmetry, at least.
I will try to formulate them in the way that I understand them. Of course, this doesn't have to be exact rendition of what, for instance, Benatar would say, but this is the way that I understand the argument, and I would defend it. So for the asymmetry,
and he did, and thank you for taking the time to do that. I wasn't attacking or anything like that. I genuinely get confused the way he worded these things. I don't know if to call them premises or propositions. I'm not. I guess they are. It took me after we had a conversation. I had to take a few moments to clarify, to figure it out. So just quickly before he continues, the things that I got confused about was moving. So I know that's very pedantic, but moving a deprived being out of existence. Under, I think colloquially, if you said that to anybody, moving a deprived being out of existence, like most people are thinking you're taking someone out of existence. What's the next thing that people usually think about, right? Like, that's not what he means, and he'll clarify that. The other thing that got to me was actual deprivation. Now, he said he could have just used just deprivation. You didn't have to put actual, but the actual part did trip me up a little bit. But yeah, anyway.
The argument I move like this. First, I say that moving a deprived being, I will go through it, premises one by one, and then I will explain them. So premise one is moving a deprived being out of existence removes actual deprivation. Premise two, moving a satisfied being out of existence does not create actual deprivation. From 1 and 2, it follows that creation of a being always creates actual deprivation and never removes it. 4, it's always better to remove actual.
I'm going to see if I can get the asymmetry, Benatar's asymmetry, up on screen. I'm using StreamYard, so I'm not too. I don't know if I can have two things sharing, so that we can compare the two, or I can compare the two. I don't know how many people are watching. If you're watching, give a holler. Mm-hmm. Okay. Googling the asymmetry is not yielding the graph in the book, which is kind of funny. Because why? But why? But why? Spiritual brains from head. I take it that's a... Hello. What? Oh, split. Split your brain. All right. Hello, split. Um, let's see. Test. If I present slides, I don't know if this is going to work, but it would be very helpful if it does. Invalid file type. Crap. All right, screw it. What did you guys discuss in D&D's after show? I didn't go on the after show. The talk about motherships and UFOs and witches got to me a little bit. I had to leave. I hope everybody's having fun with that live stream, but that was part of why I wanted to live stream today. I needed something a little bit more grounded in philosophy and not UFOs and motherships and witches. And if that person somehow finds my channel, I mean, like, to each their own, but this is not what I want to cover. And I don't know, man. There's times where I can entertain that stuff and it's okay, but yeah. I mean, what did you guys discuss in D&D's after show when Ursula? Oh, that. Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember. It'll come to me. Let me think about that.
Deprivation than to create it, and 5 from 3 and 4 follows that we should never create a being. So let's go through each premise one by one. So the first premise says that moving a deprived person, not a person, but moving a deprived being in general out of existence removes actual deprivation. So this basically means that if you think about someone in deprivation, someone who's deprived of something, of their health, of their money, of their...
Why do you ask? Split your brains from head. You sound like no brains in head, like the title of that. Are you Joy? Or one of Joy's followers?
Time or whatever. If you imagine them just not existing, not by moving out doesn't mean killing them. It means just imagine that they don't exist. They never came to existence.
See, that's what he means by moving, by the way. Like, just not imagining them and imagining them existing. That's moving.
Time or whatever. If you imagine them just not existing, not by moving out doesn't mean killing them.
Spiritual split. No, I couldn't join back then. Okay.
It means just imagine that they don't exist. They never came to existence. Going back in time, remove them out of existence. But that's good. Like, for example, we have a hospital here close to my home. It's for children with cancer. And there are little children, I mean, so many of them, and all suffering. Just imagine that building, right? Now imagine that I tell you that building doesn't exist. I just made it up. I believe you would say, okay, that was good. That's good. I mean, that's good that there isn't such a hospital there with all the children suffering. I mean, there exist such hospitals, but not here. And it's good that there is no such hospital here, that I made it up. So in that sense, that's the moving out of existence, the way that I'm talking about. That there
is still... I mean, I'm glad I know what he's conveying. I think there's a difference between a comparative state, between like a hypothetical, and an inaction to where you're preventing the being from coming into existence. I think there's a substantive difference there. I can't articulate that, but just I'm just communicating what's going on in my brain, reviewing your formulation. I am struggling, and that's because I think that we have different metaphysical views, and I appreciate being challenged on some of that. So yeah,
there is a deprivation, but then you say, okay, what if there wasn't any deprivation there? So that's the moving out of existence. And I believe we can defend this, that when you see someone in deprivation and then you just imagine them just not existing, the deprivation would also go out of existence. You see someone suffering, you're like, if they were never came into existence, that scene, that deprivation at that point in space and time would not exist. So moving a deprived being out of existence removes actual deprivation. But moving a satisfied being, and by
Just a quick note, the deprivation thing also trips me up because usually within the deprivation account, it's about the deprivation of goods. So when you say a deprived being, I think he's using it in the terms that like when you're in pain or you're yeah, like someone's in pain. Like that is someone who's in deprivation, I think.
satisfied, I mean someone who's not deprived of anything. Moving a satisfied being out of existence does not create an actual deprivation, because there wouldn't be anyone to be deprived of. So in the same format, imagine like a park close to our home. Again, people are children, they're playing there. They're happy, it's fine, they're having fun. But now imagine that actually I made it up, it doesn't exist. Did it create any actual deprivation? No. If you think that it does, it's because you're thinking of existing beings. So you might be thinking about those same children existing, sitting in their home, and they're like, oh my God, there's nowhere to go to play. You're thinking about their deprivation. Or you
I viewed it on table, so I couldn't copy the link and join quickly enough before his stream ended. I see.
might be thinking about people who would look at those children and they were like, oh, it's so nice that the children are playing there, but they're not seeing that anymore. So you're thinking of them being deprived of seeing that, scene of children playing. But there is no actual deprivation for those children. It is in a sense that they're deprived of playing those games if they just never came into existence. Because who is deprived? No one exists to be deprived, to be actually deprived.
Tablet, I mean. Okay. Put this on different screen. There we go. That's a little bit better. I want to have the asymmetry up, but I can't. I'm going to try and do that.
So that's the asymmetry that we see between 1 and 2. In 1, there's an actual deprivation that when we remove that person, that being out of existence, an actual deprivation is removed. But when you remove a satisfied being out of existence, no actual deprivation is created because no one is there to be deprived. And from 1 and 2, it follows that creation of a being always creates actual deprivation and never removes it, right? So if moving out can only remove deprivation and can never create deprivation, the other direction, coming into existence, can only create deprivation and never removes it, right? It follows from 1 and 2. And 4, everyone would agree that it's always better to remove actual deprivation than to create it, right? Removing actual deprivation is always better than creating it. And from 3 and 4, it follows, since creating a being always creates deprivation, actual deprivation, and never removes it, and it's always better to remove actual deprivation than to create it, it follows that we should never create a being. So that's the gist of the asymmetry argument. Well, not the gist of it. I mean, I gave the whole details, but anyway.
I know there's a whole video to watch, but this still gets to me. This is going to be a very pedantic live stream, and I don't care. I think I figured out how to get the image on the screen. Now, how do I add both? Test, test, test. Am I speaking? Yes, I am. Okay. Damn it. I guess I can only do one thing at a time. I will, after this live stream, I'm going to set up OBS because I can just do more. All right. But I think we can. Okay. So 1 and 2 on the left quadrant maps onto the first two premises. That's his claim. Fine. But then 3 and 4 and 5 do not map, according to him. Okay, small nitpick, but if you argue that this is the asymmetry, but the 3, 4, and 5 do not map onto this, then are you representing it correct? Like, is that accurate? I mean, again, it's a nitpick, and I get you have like a larger argument, but this is what it did trip me up, and I'm gonna move on.
Which works based on an asymmetry between the deprivation, the actual deprivation that exists, but the deprivation that wouldn't be created when you remove a person out of existence. So that's one argument. And if you notice, I used a deprived being because it can be generalized to any being. It doesn't have to be like a person. It just can be any sentient being. And what is the consent argument? The consent argument is like this. Again, going through the premises. Premise 1, we should not impose a judgment on a rational being. Creating a rational being always judges her existence to be better than non-existent.
Bro, okay, so I know some people who are familiar with the consent argument. The way that he's framing this, and I would love someone to comment or send me a message on X or Discord or email. His formulation, like his framing of the consent argument, do you agree with it? Do you think that that's an accurate, like, it's a map onto your understanding? Because straight off the gate, when he says we should not impose a judgment on a rational being, I don't remember that in the literature. Creating a rational being always judges her existence to be better than non-existence. Anyway, I'm going to try my best to just move on from this. But if anybody knows more about this particular argument, I'd be curious about your thoughts. Please, hit me up.
Existence. Premise 3, a non-existent being cannot judge her existence to be better than a non-existence. 4, which follows from 2 and 3, creating a rational being always imposes a judgment on her. And 5, from 1 and 4, it follows that we should never create a rational being. So premise 1 says that we should not impose a judgment on a rational being. So that's the assumption here that we have on consent, in a sense that, now what I mean by rational being, if you watch my videos on metaphysics, in the lecture on person, I define a person, a rational being, as an entity who's a subject of his experience, who is the agent of his actions, but more importantly, he is the asker of the normative question. In a sense,
so you're using moral agency, and again, we are using different words here. So when you say a person is someone with moral, I don't even think you said moral agent. I think you just said agent. I would be curious about moral subjects and moral patients that don't have that form of rationality. Would those be considered persons? Let's see. I did join the after show yesterday. It was funny towards the end. Quickly got fierced. It was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was tempted to go on, but yeah, went to bed early instead. It was good. I needed the sleep, but now I feel groggy.
That we're not only doing things, but we ask what's better to do. What's the best thing to do here? Should I do A or should I do B? Is A good for me or B good for me? We judge these situations. So we ask this kind of normative question, which one is better? What should I do? Should I do this or should I do that? So that's what I mean by a rational being. I mean a person. And the idea is
So, what about marginal cases like those that can't make these decisions? Kids, for example, babies, are they not persons? Now, he probably talks about this in his metaphysics on that video. And you know what? If I have time, I might review it because I feel like I'm missing a lot of information to review this.
is that we should not
Let's see. Her and Divine were arguing with that other man. I gotta say, Chickpea versus Divine. That was pretty entertaining. And I mean, but was it informative? I don't know if it was informative, but it was entertaining. I got, yeah, popcorn time.
not impose a judgment on rational being. And this comes from the assumption of rational autonomy. The autonomy of rational beings. Now, I don't want to defend this position. It's not completely unrelated to the categorical imperative of Kant, but I don't want to get into those details as well.
Boom. You have Mr. Revise. Yo, Rent Man. You have a fan or a troll. I don't know which one.
I guess everyone can agree with this. That
Yeah, it was not just in sense maybe learning about Gnosticism. I'm skeptical about Divine's interpretation of Gnosticism. I'm pretty ignorant about Gnosticism, but it feels like D&W and Noodles probably know more about that, and probably D-Prophet. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I would trust the interpretation of Gnosticism. Actually, I don't trust anybody. So, I mean, I'd if I wanted to learn about Gnosticism, I would have read something like the Wikipedia at the very least. Maybe I should. I just don't know how much it overlaps with antinatalism, really. I know there's a lot of people talking about Gnosticism in freaking antinatalism spaces. I don't know what the hell is up with that phenomenon. People are talking about simulation theory, and they're talking about like the antinatalism world. So weird.
it's something that we should respect in a sense that since we are rational beings and we don't want that to happen to us, we want to be able to make judgments for ourselves, to be able to say what's good for me. In the same sense, we should respect it.
Oh god, we were talking about yesterday. Divine is neither a new age narcissist. What is either a new age narcissist or schizophrenic or both? So one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people spend a lot of time on YouTube. Like I think both Chickpea and Divine said that they don't really leave the house, and I don't want to put that down too much because I've chosen a type of hermit lifestyle as well. And the reason I did that is so I could learn more. Like I could work, I can, do my exercise, and I can just read my books and just try and, hunker down and study more. But I think if you spend your time on social media quite a bit, this and it depends on which areas that you surround yourself in. It could do some funny things to your brain. Mr. Revise, cosmicism is the truth. Okay, I'm gonna have to Google that. Cosmicism. Cosmicism is a philosophy that emphasizes the insignificance of humans in vast universe. Oh, often associated with Lovecraft. Oh, I think I've heard about this before. Okay, fair. She's delusional. She's talking about being on the mothership. Yes. Yeah, you got to know where to spend it. Yep. Yesterday gave me a little bit of a YouTube existential crisis. I think I'm spending my time in areas that don't really suit me. And that goes on Discord as well. And I might change my mind literally by tonight. We don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going with the flow. Okay, back to okay. You have a there you go.
Said for other rational beings as well. So we should not impose a judgment. We should not tell someone else what's good for them. We should not impose something on them and say, this is good for you. No, they have to decide what's good for them. So that's premise one. The premise two is creating a rational being always judges her existence to be better than non existence. And this is because those who create a rational being are rational themselves. So our parents are also rational entities, they're also persons. So when someone decides to create a person, what they're actually doing is that they're judging through their
Considering yesterday's topic since Divine joined, it's understandable. DNW is trying to be a lefty Gnostic Pierce Morgan. Nick, what are you trying to do right now? Because you're not in antinatalism, and you're not. I guess are you just focusing on veganism? And what happened to all your live streams? Like the last live stream that we did, or that I was on, we showed you some stuff, and like I don't even know your reaction to it. And yeah, Tom, I'm back. Oh, you have someone who said hi to you, by the way, Tom. Apparently, I'm a messenger. Mr. Revise says, "Yo, rant man." What were you guys? Okay, you guys have your chat in my chat. I'm going to focus on the video.
their own rationality that is better for that child to exist than not to exist. So they're making a judgment that her existence, by her I mean the rational being, is better than non-existence, is something that should be done. So they're making a judgment on this normative question. And premise 3 says that a non-existent being cannot judge her existence to be better than non-existent because they don't exist. Something that doesn't exist cannot judge her existence to be better than non-existence. So it follows from two.
You can choose not to get involved, but I don't know why you would call it nonsense. I mean, it's a position that's, we all agree on that to be against. So when talking about ethics, this should be an easy peasy one.
And 3, that if we create a rational being, it always imposes a judgment on her. Because she cannot make a judgment, you make the judgment. So it's your call. It's always imposing a judgment. And since we should not impose a judgment, it follows that we should never create a rational being. So you can see that in this argument, on the consent argument, the focus is on rational being. On the asymmetry part, which is based on the deprivation, is just on the sentient. Now, I believe that this there's a distinction between these two arguments because there's an ontological distinction between a violation of consent and a deprivation, in a sense that they are two different sorts of things.
Oh, might upload a video soon reading Chiron. Nice. That's cool.
So why is that? I mean, we can compare these two together. Violation of consent and deprivation. I believe they're different things. I wouldn't go into all the details, all the ontological details of it, but just a couple of points to make that distinction. I believe violation of consent is something that it has a point in time. It happens at a point in time, while deprivation, it has a time duration.
Well, I don't talk to any of those people anymore anyway. I feel like it's a whole can of worms, but all right.
Consent can be violated in an instance, in other words. But deprivation, you cannot be deprived for an instance. You see, an instance, it doesn't have a duration. Just
wait, now, who are you talking about? Like, stop having kids? Like, who people are you talking about? Because you talked to the D&W crew. And now you piqued my interest, but whatever. I also want to focus on this and okay.
Says at that moment, but it cannot be deprived at that moment. It can only be deprived for a period of time. A violation of consent is a crossing of a line or threshold. Deprivation is more like remaining over or under a threshold. For example, you might say that you forced this party on me. You forced me to be in this party. That's a crossing of a line. Or you might say that you gave me coffee while I'll ask for tea. That's a violation. That's you making a judgment on my behalf. And you put sugar in it while I was looking away. You didn't ask for it. I was looking away. You put sugar in it. That's violation of consent. And you can see that they're happening. There are decisions that you made, and there are things that happen at a point in time. While on the account of deprivation, it would be to say you wasted my time in this party. You see, that's a period. You made me anxious by giving me coffee. That's a period that you were anxious because of that caffeine in the coffee. And you made me sick by putting sugar in it. I felt bad.
So interesting to note. He's talking about deprivation under antinatalism. A sneak peek of Rivka Weinberg, she believes that when it comes to the philosophy of death and the deprivation account, well, I don't even know if she's going to call it the deprivation account, but she believes that the problem with death is the timing, some of the timing puzzles, and she's going to create. She's in the works of a book. I'm excited for the book, but that was like a year or two ago. I don't know. Still on my radar.
Eating that sugar. So you can always sense this kind of difference between violation of consent and deprivation, that a violation of consent is something that is like crossing a line. It happens at a point in time. But the deprivation, it's something that has a duration. You have to endure that deprivation. And it also happens in the way that we count them. Like a violation of consent, because it's like a crossing of a line, you can count it. You can say, okay, you forced me to this party, I asked for coffee, you gave me tea, and I was looking away, you put sugar in it. 3 times you violate my consent. But the deprivation is like more like measuring, how many hours did you waste my time? How anxious did you make me? For how long? Or how long was I sick because of eating that sugar? And more importantly, the violation of consent part, rationality is necessary for it. Because as we said, the first premise is that the rational being, we should not impose a judgment on rational being. Because consent is something that you need that kind of normative behavior in that agent to ask what's better for me.
I don't think so. I think that marginal cases of humans, it'll still cash out that you don't violate consent, even though they may not have the rational capability. So I don't know if I accept that premise.
A violation would be to impose a decision, a judgment. But for deprivation, sentient is enough. So we can see that these two arguments basically are tackling different aspects of us. They both work for us because we do have a rational aspect and we do also have a sentient aspect. Now, for me, it's not necessary, but for me, because I'm a substance dualist, they're very clean and neat because I have this kind of person substance. That's the rationality side. They also have this kind of animal side, the body. That's the sentient part, and you can have these two not completely separated, but at least you can have a nice parallel between them. But the point is that these two arguments apply to us because we have that rationality side, and we can also talk about the deprivation. So we're not only, by coming into existence, not only our consent has been violated, but we're also being deprived of basically anything that we're deprived of during life. There are actual deprivation by coming into existence. Now, why is this important? Why is this distinction between consent and deprivation important? Because I believe that it will have some practical applications. For instance, on death, Benatar's view on death is that death is bad because it's based on the deprivation account. So Benatar basically says that he's talking about death of Beth, and he says that these are the propositions that we can say about her death. He talks about this in the book Human Predicament. He says that Beth is the person for whom death is bad. The period during which Beth is dead is is a period during which her death is bad for her. You see, so he has a deprivation account, so he talks about a period. That period begins with the moment of Beth's death. This is an important point, because you might think that, hey, like, sometimes I talk about deprivation as a point in time, but if you think about it, it's not a point in time, it's the starting point of that period. So sometimes that starting point is important, so it stays in our mind, but it's not about that point specifically, it's about a period and the starting point of that period. So that period begins with the moment of Beth's death, and thus that is the time when the bad first befalls her, even though the badness of death is clearly not restricted to that instance, and will not be felt as death terminates consciousness. And D, according to at least some views, it's always true, both while Beth is alive and after she's dead, that her death is bad for her during the period when she's dead. He also talks about this kind of eternal badness. But the point is that he says that my view says that the bad of death befalls someone when it first occurs, and it continues to be bad for as long as it lasts. So that's the view that Benatar has. And to me, it's a kind of strange position to have, and I will get back to this. I also explained it in the short video that I put up, the kind of strange conclusion that it would have, but I will come back to it. Now, on the other side of this kind of viewpoint, so Benatar is basically answering another position, and that's the Epicurean position. The Epicurean position says that death cannot be a deprivation. And what's the argument for it? The argument is like this. One, a deprivation requires a period of time. Epicurus, it talks about the fact that you need to feel that, you need to experience that deprivation. So you need to exist for that period. You need to endure through that deprivation. So deprivation requires a period of time. Premise 2, before death of A, and A is that person or Beth, before death of A, no deprivation due to death exists. Note that we are just talking about the deprivation of death itself. Of course, there are some effects, because you might be afraid of death, you might get anxious, you might be sick before actually dying. That's a different issue. We're just talking about the death itself, just the annihilation of your existence. So before death of A, no deprivation exists, right? Because you haven't died yet. Now, after death of A does not exist to be deprived. Premise 4, it follows from 2 and 3 that before or after death of A is not deprived. Now, premise 5, any period of time is either before death or after death of A, right? But then it follows from 1, 4, and 5 that A's death cannot be a deprivation, because deprivation requires a period of time. Any period of time will either be before the death of A or after death of A. But in premise 4, it says that before or after A is not deprived, so A's death cannot be a deprivation. So Benatar's basically the position that he provides is a kind of anti-Epicurean position as a response, as an alternative to this. But why is it that Benatar...
Even the Epicurus argument, I don't know if I need to listen to this section again.
Side of this kind of viewpoint, so Benatar is basically answering another position, and that's the Epicurean position. The Epicurean position says that death cannot be a deprivation. And what's the argument for it? The argument is like this. One, a deprivation requires a period of time. Epicurus, it talks about the fact that you need to feel that, you need to experience that deprivation. So you need to exist for that period. You need to endure through that deprivation. So deprivation requires a period of time. Premise 2, before death of A, and A is that person or Beth, before death of A, no deprivation due to death exists. Note that we are just talking about the deprivation of death itself. Of course, there are some effects, because you might be afraid of death, you might get anxious, you might be sick before actually dying, that's a different issue. We're just talking about the death itself, just the annihilation of your existence. So before death of A, no deprivation exists, right? Because you haven't died yet. Now, after death of A does not exist to be deprived. Premise 4, it follows from 2 and 3 that before or after death of A is not deprived. Now, premise 5, any period of time is either before death or after death of A, right? But then it follows from 1, 4, and 5 that A's death cannot be a deprivation, because deprivation requires a period of time. Any period of time will either be before the death of A or after death of A. But in premise 4, it says that before or after A is not deprived, so A's death cannot be a deprivation. So,
okay, I followed that. Given his terminology, usually I would argue this from like an existence requirement, that death isn't bad for the one who dies because of these conditions. But the way he formulated it, I got it. I get where he's coming from, and I think we're on the same page.
Benatar's basically the position that he provides is a kind of anti-Epicurean position as a response, as an alternative to this. But why is it that Benatar thinks that he should provide an alternative to this position? Because he doesn't really defend the position that he has. So if you read the section on death, he basically proposes this alternative, and he says that even though all the other bads that we talk about does not follow the same pattern. I mean, it follows all of them, but there's one most important element, is that for all the other bads that we talk about, that person has to exist to endure through that period of deprivation, but death is a special case. That sounds like question begging. I mean, not question begging, but at least you have to explain why death is such a special case. And he doesn't do that. And I guess the only argument that he has, like if you read through it, the only strong point that Benatar tries to make is that this Epicurean position leads to absurd results. Like, I mean, he talks about many different forms of the Epicurean argument, tries to argue against it. But from what I understood, it's the main thing that really bothers Benatar is the absurd conclusions that follows from Epicurean position.
Just to be clear, I was only taking the piss about Morgan comment, just in case W is watching. Okay.
So he has a kind of like, reductio ad absurdum argument against Epicurean. But the point is that if we make that distinction between violation of consent and deprivation account in an ontological sense, then we can see that death can be bad without being a deprivation. So Benatar's refutation of this position is that, one, we would have to revise our views about how bad painless murder.
Nick, what did you mean by this, by the way?
Is. So that's a problem that Benatar has, that if we accept the Epicurean position that death is never a deprivation for the person who dies, then if you painlessly kill someone, then nothing bad has happened. And two, he also tries to undermine the position that Epicurean has, that we have to revise our views about how bad painless murder is. So that's a problem that Benatar has, that if we accept.
Did you remember what was the discussion that after stream? Oh, right. I think it was I remember talking to Chickpea. And Tamil, or to what's his name? But what were we talking about? Fuck. Nope, I'm sorry. I don't remember. We weren't talking about antinatalism. I think, Jesus, I don't fucking remember. Goddamn.
Accept the Epicurean position that death is never a deprivation for the person who dies, then if you painlessly kill someone, then nothing bad has happened. And two, he also tries to undermine the the position that Epicurean
Yeah, Steve hopped on for the after show. I don't remember what he was talking about either.
has, that you have to endure that experience of deprivation for it to be bad. So he gives this example that suppose that your spouse is unfaithful to you by having sex with someone else, and this is done without your ever learning of that infidelity. And if Epicurean position is correct, then you're not deprived of anything, but we still feel like something bad has happened. So he says, okay, see, this doesn't make sense. It seems that Epicurean cannot be true. But the point is that these two examples, I believe, both badness of both of these cases seems to come from the consent violation and not deprivation. See, now that we made that distinction between consent and deprivation as two different ontological kinds, we can actually go to the consent. We can say, okay, it's not a deprivation, none of these two cases, but it's still bad because it's a consent violation. And we can see that because one, about death, as we said, is a crossing of threshold, and it's bad because you're imposing the decision on me. You see, life and death is a judgment that I can make. I can decide whether I want to live or die. When you kill me, you make that decision for me. You make that judgment for me. It's better that you die. So that's a violation of consent. You're crossing something, and it doesn't need any period. So the moment that you kill me, you wrong me. So that's for one.
Wait, ¿por qué dos? Why not both? We would have to revise our views about how bad painless murder is. Your spouse is unfaithful. Why not? Why not both? I don't want to replay it, but I don't know why it wouldn't be both.
Two is a little bit more complicated. So imagine that your spouse is unfaithful to you by having sex with someone else, and you don't know about this. And Benatar claims that this is a deprivation, even though you don't know it. Now, whether this is deprivation or not, that's a different issue. But I guess we can still claim that's not a deprivation if it doesn't impact you at all. I mean, it might be a deprivation in the same sense that when you put sugar in my coffee, it's a violation of my consent, but it has some kind of effects in sense of deprivation. So if your spouse is
this, like, if your spouse or someone like commits adultery or whatever, if you say it's your awareness of it, then the wrong maker, like if you're having a conversation with someone and you say, well, the wrongness wasn't the fact that the act happened. The wrongness happened because you're aware of what happened. That was the badness. And I think that doesn't cash out.
Is unfaithful to you, then it might impact your relationship with her. So there might be some deprivation, but the actual act of that sexual act, I don't think is a deprivation. Rather, it's a violation of consent. And I believe the way that we can actually distinguish between these two is to look back again at the properties of these two different kinds.
He does talk about this under deprivation, but he's using this as an exemplar about how you don't need the existence requirement or the awareness of the wrong for the wrong to happen, for deprivations to happen. I mean, this is like, I need to review that chapter again to even make those assertions, but this is from what I vaguely remember.
Kinds of things. One of them was a crossing of a line, the other one was enduring something. Now, suppose that it's not about sex, unfaithful. Let's suppose, just to make the problem simpler, let's suppose that it's about kissing someone. And also, let's suppose that the moment that your spouse kisses someone else, that person dies. Not as a consequence of the kissing, in the sense that you cause that person to die, because someone might claim, okay, there's still a duration of time from this cause and effect. Let's just suppose that it's just accidentally the moment that you kiss her or kiss them, they die right at that moment. It just happens at the same time. And there's no duration during which, there's no period during which that you have been kissing someone. It's just one moment you kissed and they die. So there's no period of time during which you are deprived of anything, if you are ever deprived of anything. But we still feel like something bad has happened. Even though she kissed at one moment, she's still unfaithful. And I guess this hints that it's not about deprivation account, it's about the fact that she crossed the line. She violated something about our
I think he's right, but I think that the reason that was used was an example of you don't have to be aware of the wrong, and that's used to like talk about an objection to deprivationism, that you have to be aware of the wrong, and if you don't exist, your wrongs don't happen to you. But huh. Okay,
rational
I could be wrong. Like, it's been a while since it's not fresh in my memory, but that's my understanding.
judgment. So again, this I believe it shows that we're the badness that we feel is not from the sort of deprivation that we feel, even though it might be there something related to it. But even if we clean out all the deprivation, we still feel the badness because of the consent violation part. So we can still be on the side of Epicurean arguments to say that death is not a deprivation, and yet don't get to these absurd positions. Now, this has three interesting consequences, what I've been saying up to now. Now, two of them are very controversial, but one of them is not. So the first conclusion that I would make from this kind of ontological distinction between consent violation and deprivation is that it's not wrong, at least based on these two issues of consent or deprivation. It's not wrong.
Okay, let me know if you remember. Why are you curious? Sounds like you have like why do you want to know?
To painlessly kill a sentient being that does not constitute a person. Because if there's no person, there's no violation of consent. And if you painlessly kill a sentient being, there is no deprivation. So no deprivation, no violation of consent.
What comment, vegan? What? What comment, vegan? What does that mean? I don't.
At least regarding these two issues, I mean, there might be some other accounts of why this might be bad, like in terms of social.
I just forgot I didn't join that show. I don't remember. I don't think I will remember. Like, as time goes on, I'm just gonna forget about it. So I recommend asking Tamil or whatever his name was in Chickpea. I don't remember
Facts or anything, but just in terms of these two, it's not.
Oh, I was talking to Equilibrium. Okay. Okay.
Wrong to do so.
I think this conclusion. So the premise that I disagreed with was that a person needs to be a rational being. I think that sentient beings that don't rationalize the way that we rationalize, still, we should not kill them, even painlessly. And an appeal to that would be marginal cases of humans. I don't know how that's cashed out to sophophilia. I might review his video on persons because I think that's underlying his conclusion here.
This is controversial, right? Because basically saying that it's possible, at least theoretically, to kill.
Does Tanel have a channel too? I think so. I don't have the URL. But like next live stream that D&W has, he's probably going to be on there, and Chickpea's probably going to be on there. So you could just like ping them.
Kill animals that are not persons, that are not rational beings like us. Now, I have to modify this in a couple of ways. One is that I'm not saying that in practice this is possible, because in practice We can never painlessly kill. Animals become aware. They know they're going to die. They become anxious. They are social animals, so there's a community. We will impose deprivation on other animals. So this
because he's pro-life, and because I was thinking maybe he could bite the bullet on uh killing marginal cases of humans. Like maybe he'll bite the bullet on that, but then that wouldn't work out under a pro-life uh framework. So I'm more confused after watching this.
distance between theory and practice is large. That's one point. The other one is that someone might accuse me of being of speciesism, right? But the point is that I'm not talking about human beings versus other animals. I'm talking about persons versus other animals. So for me, so just to show that I'm not a speciesist, for me, it's metaphysically possible to have a person, sorry, to have a human being that doesn't constitute a person. Now, if we do have that, then I believe that it's not wrong to painlessly kill that animal.
Okay, so he is biting the bullet that we can painlessly kill a human if they don't constitute a person. But then how are you pro-life? I'm so confused.
That animal of the species Homo sapien, because it doesn't constitute a person. So I don't make any difference between this type of animal or that species of animal. I make a difference between a person.
So what's so if you feel, what's your view on infanticide? Like, how do you cash that out? I'm assuming you're not in favor of that.
And other sentient beings that do not constitute a person. So that's one controversial claim, which I believe follows from this distinction. The other one that's not controversial is actually something that I believe we should hold. Is the opposite of the controversial claim that Benatar makes, that death is bad, that it starts from the moment of death, the badness, and it lasts as long as the death lasts. And the problem is that if intermittent non-existence, so this is the position that I believe would follow, that if intermittent non-existence is metaphysically possible, in the sense that when we die, it's possible for us to come back, I believe that coming back to existence is still a bad thing. But based on Benatar's position,
this I never thought about, and this is interesting. If intermittent non-existence is metaphysically possible, coming back to existence is still a harm. I mean, okay, so my first thoughts are that, like, he believes death is a harm and that being created into existence is a harm. So that, I mean, he calls it like the human predicament, right? Like you're stuck between a hard, what is it, the saying? You're stuck between a hard place and a rock or whatever, a rock and a hard place. I think that fits even with intermittent non-existence. That the creation, so yes, death is bad, but then also the creation of life. Like I think the same way he reconciles coming into existence and ceasing to exist, just as he says both are bad. If you could come into existence, like the values are symmetrical, it seems, on first glance.
since it's a bad thing, since it's a deprivation, we should stop it as soon as possible. At least it's a good thing to do it. You will remove a deprivation. But then you face a challenge here, because if Benatar is an antinatalist and he wants to argue for extinction of human beings, now suppose that this is metaphysically possible to bring people back to life, then that means that the moment that science device becomes available, then Benatar should also start advocating for bringing people back from death. But there seems to be a tension because on the one
But I think there's I have to watch his metaphysics stuff because there's a difference between coming back into existence and being created into existence. From one, you're starting with zero, right? Like you're starting from ex nihilo or whatever you call it. And so from nothing, you're creating a being versus the being exists now and returning to existence is these are both different cases. Creating a being and uh being reborn because that's a continuation of an existing being in different states versus creating from nothing. My head hurts. Nah, I'm just joking. Um, do. Big hello, brother Marcus. Ascetic here from Adrian's Discord server. Oh, hello, Ascetic. How are you? I saw you on politics and religion, the Discord server. I don't know. I forgot which channel you were in, but yeah, hope you're, having fun on Discord and arguing with people on the internet. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really too interested in the atheism God debate, though I think I need a refresher because I forgot all the arguments, and that was many years ago. If you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing,
one hand, he's trying to reduce the population, but on the other hand, he's also advocating for increasing the
Yeah, I wanted to laugh a bit. Channel was science versus atheism. Okay.
population by bringing people back from death. So he's kind of undoing his own position. I don't think that makes sense. I
haven't worked this out fully, but I think there's a difference because you can argue that because the being exists, they have interests, and their interests were deprived. Being brought back, you're bringing back like a being that has already existed. When you create a being, the person didn't exist prior to that. So I think there is a difference there.
believe that the consent part says that the first time that you brought me into existence, you violated my consent. That was my decision. When you killed me, you violated my consent. When you brought me back to existence, you again violated my consent. That's 3 violation. And 2 wrongs here don't make it right. So if you violated to bring me back existence, that doesn't make it right. So even if you kill me and you have the option to bring me back, you shouldn't, because again you're making a judgment on my behalf. Then that's something that I should do.
But then on the face of it, that sounds right. But now I'm thinking about like cases where you don't have a do not resuscitate order and you want someone to save your life. You're doing something against, well, I have to think about that more.
Not you. So, and the third consequence is what I said earlier, that in the argument for consent, and one of the reasons that people don't look good. I mean, they don't think that the consent argument is a good argument. Is that I said if a rational being cannot make a judgment, so that's the consequence, that we cannot impose a judgment on a rational being even if they cannot make such a judgment. So that was applied when we bring someone into existence. They don't exist, so they cannot make a rational judgment. But when we bring them into existence, we make that judgment on their behalf. People would say, okay, but I mean, when people are born, they cannot make any judgment. Like a newborn baby, what kind of judgment can they make? Even if you
Yes, okay, thank God. I thought I would have to watch his other video, but it looks like he's going to address this here now.
claim that they're rational entities, they cannot make any judgment. So they think, oh, it doesn't make any sense. I cannot really ask for consent. But that's like saying that. I mean, that
Don't laugh at me, you little.
the fact that we cannot, the fact that um, the consent of the baby will always be violated does not reduce the gravity of the situation. It adds to it. That's like saying that if you're living in a society where people are born into slavery, then it really doesn't make sense to criticize slavery, because you're like, what are you saying? Like, okay, if people are born into slavery, that's what they do the moment they're born. There's nothing else. It's of natural necessity that they're born slaves. So it doesn't really make sense.
Just finished recording me reading chapter 1 of Trouble with Being Born. Sweet. Cool. I'll have a look.
To criticize it, but that doesn't make sense. That just means that our situation in the society is so messed up that people are born into slavery of national.
He's lost me. He's lost me. I don't understand the comparison between the personhood of, say, an infant versus slavery. Oh boy.
Natural necessity. So in the same sense, if you say that we are born and we cannot make judgments, that just adds to the gravity of the situation, because it just means that our situation in existence is so messed up that it is of natural necessity that when we are born into a situation in which our judgment and our consent will be violated constantly for years.
So, yeah, yes. But I think the contention is whether or not these are persons. I would argue that they are persons because they have interests and preferences, even if they can't make rational moral choices. And I don't know what constitutes a person for Sophie-philia. And it looks like I will have to review that video. Unless we've got a few more minutes and he explains it.
Years. That just makes things worse. And I see this as a kind of counterpart to the deprivation account that Benatar gives. So Benatar first talks about the asymmetry, and from there he concludes that coming into existence is a harm.
Nitpick, conscious interests and preferences. These are subjects of a life.
But then he continues by talking about how bad our lives are, and how bad we judge our life. I mean, we think it's much better than it actually is. And so in the end, he concludes that it's actually not just a harm, it's actually great harm to come into existence.
Yes.
So the counterpart of that for the consent argument is that it not only just violates your consent, it's greatly violates you, because it puts you in a position that you will just, of natural necessity, you will be violated for years to come, until you really become aware of what's going on and you basically take control of your life. And this is not just a theoretical thing. I mean, we do feel violated if you just look back through your life. Don't you really feel violated for the country you were born into, for the family you were born into, the culture, the food, the movies you watched, the school you went to, the things you talked about, the things they taught you, the things that they told you it's good, the things that they told you is bad? Everything.
Yeah, bro. To live is to be manipulated.
The clothes that you wear, the people you talk to, places you visited, all these things, they shaped who you are. And when you look back, you feel like, I was the same person who was back then.
I wish I could zoom in on him, making that little.
And the same rational being, but I just couldn't make a decision for myself. And these people just, for the family you were born into, it's not just a theoretical thing. I mean, we do feel violated.
This is a good little, I don't know, little rant he does here. I could sense the passion.
Basically take control of your life. And this is not just a theoretical thing. I mean, we do feel violated if you just look back through your life. Don't you really feel violated for the country you were born into, for the family you were born into, the culture, the food, the movies you watched, the school you went to, the things you talked about, the things they taught you, the things that they told you it's good, the things that they told you is bad. Everything, the clothes that you wear, the people you talk to, places you visited, all these things, they shaped who you are. And when you look back, you feel like, I was the same person who was back then, the same rational being, but I just couldn't make a decision for myself, and these people just kept making it for me. You couldn't do anything about it. No one can do anything about it, but that doesn't mean that uh, then everything's fine. That just means how
That was a good little clip for that section.
how serious harm it is to bring someone into existence. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I was trying to make it to keep it short. I don't know how long it is, but yeah, I believe if we can make this kind of distinction between the ontology of consent violation and deprivation,
37:19.
we can actually make sense much more.
I'm okay with long form content. I think I've come to terms with like the way YouTube operates. Fuck it.
Of these two arguments that we have and how it relates to death, and also it might have these kind of interesting consequences for vegetarian and being vegan. Thank you.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you, Sophie-Philia. You gave me some things to think about, particularly when it comes to what's it called? Creating a new, not creating new, like bringing someone back to life. Are you doing a harm under Benatar's analysis, or even under yours? Just would be I don't even know how that would work out ethically, but I think there is a difference there between creating and bringing someone back. And then the other thing was what constitutes a person. So I'm gonna look that up. Okay. Hopefully I can find it, because yeah, for this video to make sense, I think I need to know. Oh, it's literally just the one before that, person. Substance dualism in persons. But it's an hour. It's almost an hour long, and I'm cool with an hour. I wanted to do other things today. Yeah, it looks like the video beforehand was the one on persons. I don't see any other videos on this. It's 11. It's almost 11:30 my time. Okay, I might be back to review his video on persons because I think it's important to this video, but it is going to take a while, and I want to set up OBS. I don't like StreamYard in this regard because I can't pull up slides. I can't pull up. I can't do a lot that I'm used to with OBS compared to StreamYard. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. Breakfast is done. We have some thoughts on death and how that relates to veganism or vegetarianism. I think he said vegetarianism and not veganism. Don't know why that distinction, but anyway. If you have a comment or any thoughts on this, please send me a message on X or Discord or email. And also, if you have any thoughts, also leave a comment on his video as well. Oh, let me leave a link in the chat. And I'll also link it in the video description, like my stream description as well after this stream. So this is the video URL. I've put it in the chat, but I'm also going to put it in the description. All right, guys, I'm going to be back later today when I have my system set up, because I miss live streaming on Twitch as well. I'm not too sure if I could dual stream. I'm hoping to do more theory live streams, more boring long form live streams. That means like 5 years. That's great because been part of other live streams that have been a little bit more dramatic, and I'm getting tired of that type of entertainment. For now, anyway. All right. Happy Saturday, or whatever. Have a Saturday. And I will be back later today once I get some errands taken care of and software configuration. And yeah, all right. Take care, everybody. And Sophie, if you see this, hit me up as well. I think I still have questions, but they may be answered in your other video, which I will review later today. All right. Take care, everyone. Cheers.